There comes a moment in every journey when the excitement disappears, and only the struggle remains. A moment where most people give up. A moment where the old version of you whispers, "See? I told you. You can't change." For Tet, that moment came much earlier than he expected, because the decision to change was easy, but living that decision, every hour, every morning, every choice, was something else entirely. After day 1, he felt proud, but after day 3, he felt tired. By day 5, doubt had already begun to creep back in. His mind kept replaying old habits, old routines, old excuses, and the scary part was, they still felt comfortable, they still felt safe, they still felt like home, and that's the hardest part about becoming a new person. You have to let go of the place where you've lived your whole life, your past self. On the night before day 7, Tet stared at the ceiling again, breathing heavily, feeling the weight of his old patterns pulling him backwards. He didn't know it yet, but the next chapter of his journey would become a turning point, a battle he had to face alone. A battle between who he was yesterday, and who he was trying so hard to become, and that's where our chapter 2 begins, not in victory, but in the quiet, painful space where change starts to test you before it rewards you. Tet never expected a single morning to change the way he looked at his entire life, yet it happened on a day that began like any other, quiet, ordinary, and painfully familiar. He woke up to the same alarm tone he had heard for years, the same buzzing vibration that made him swipe half asleep across the screen, but on that morning the sound felt heavier, as if it was echoing inside a room full of choices he had never made. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, feeling the same tiredness that never seemed to go away, the kind that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from living the same routine without moving forward. Outside, the world was waking up, motorbikes rushing somewhere, people preparing for something, life happening with purpose, while he sat still, feeling like a paused moment in a moving world. And for the first time, he wondered deeply, quietly, painfully, what am I doing? It was a question he never allowed himself to ask before, because he already feared the answer. He walked to the mirror, rubbing his eyes, and saw a version of himself that felt unfamiliar, someone who had dreams once but now looked like he was only surviving. His reflection carried the weight of promises he broke to himself, workouts he never finished, books he planned but never read, goals he wrote and abandoned, and years of telling himself, "I'll start tomorrow." The mirror didn't lie. It rarely does. And that morning, it felt like it was whispering something he didn't want to hear, "You're losing time." He brushed his teeth slowly, mechanically, listening to the tap water hit the sink as if it were counting seconds he had wasted. He made the same breakfast he always made, scrolled through the same apps he always scrolled, watched the same faces succeeding in ways he wished he could, and each notification felt like a small reminder that everyone was moving except him. When he went outside, the sun felt brighter than usual, not warm, but sharp, almost exposing, and he felt strangely vulnerable standing under it, like the light was revealing how much he was pretending to be okay. That morning he walked to his usual tea shop, sat at his usual spot, and ordered his usual drink, but something was different. People around him were talking about plans, jobs, goals, tomorrow, next week, next month. And he had nothing to say. He listened silently, stirring his cup even though the sugar had long dissolved, feeling the sting of realization settling deeper with every word around him. He wasn't growing. He wasn't learning. He wasn't trying. He was waiting for motivation, for the right time, for a sign, for a reason, while life continued without him. And that was when he felt it, a sudden tightening in his chest, not painful, but overwhelming, like something inside him was finally waking up after sleeping for too long. He didn't know whether it was frustration or sadness or fear, but he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, urgency. A voice inside him whispered, not loud, but steady, as if it had been waiting for him to listen, "If you don't change now, nothing will ever change." It was so simple, so obvious, so brutally true that he looked down at his hands shaking slightly. He finished his tea and walked without direction, letting his feet take him anywhere just to escape the noise in his head. The streets he had seen 1,000 times suddenly looked different, like they were asking him what he planned to do with the rest of his life. He saw a group of young people jogging in the park, sweating, laughing, pushing each other. He saw an old man exercising slowly with determination. He saw a student reading on a bench. Everyone was trying. Everyone was becoming something. And there he was, watching. He sat under a tree, listening to the wind moving through the branches, feeling time pass in gentle waves, and for the first time in months, maybe years, he allowed himself to imagine a different version of himself. Not a perfect version. Not a successful version. Just a version that tried. A version that didn't give up before starting. A version he wouldn't be ashamed to meet in the mirror. The idea felt small, almost fragile, but it was real, and it spread warmth through his chest in a way he hadn't felt in ages. Maybe he didn't need to change his entire life overnight. Maybe all he needed was to decide, to take one step, one real step. As he sat there, listening to the world move around him, he whispered to himself, quietly but firmly, "It's time." And in that moment, the world didn't shift, the skies didn't open, no miracle happened. But something inside him changed. A spark. A push. A beginning. And that was enough. Tet didn't become a different person that day. But that was the day he stopped lying to himself. The day he stopped waiting. The day he finally understood that change doesn't come from dreams, or wishes, or plans written in notebooks. Change comes from choosing to begin. As he stood up from beneath the tree and took his first step toward an unknown future, he didn't know what the next 90 days would bring. He didn't know how many times he would struggle or fail or want to quit. But he knew one thing for certain, the old version of him, the one who waited and wished, stayed behind on that morning. And the person walking away, quietly determined, trembling but hopeful, was someone new, someone ready. Someone finally willing to change. Tet woke up on the 7th morning realizing that change wasn't a straight line but a slow climb, and sometimes the climb felt impossible before it even started. He sat on his bed again, just like he did on the first morning, but this time the feeling was different. The motivation from day one had faded, the excitement from deciding to change had dissolved, and all that remained was the heavy reality of what he had committed to. He rubbed his face with both hands, feeling the tiredness behind his eyes, and for a long moment he didn't move. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock, each second reminding him that time was passing whether he wanted to move or not. He picked up his phone, not because he needed it, but simply out of habit, and as soon as he saw the notifications, he felt the familiar pull of distraction creeping back in. Funny videos, messages, posts, updates, the world trying to pull him away from the person he was trying to become. And for a moment, he almost let it. His thumb hovered above the screen, the temptation so strong he could feel his heart responding to it. But then something inside him whispered, "If you do this now, you're back at zero." That small voice saved him. He put the phone down slowly, like he was letting go of a dangerous weapon. He stood up and walked toward the mirror again. The same mirror from day one, the same reflection, the same eyes, but somehow they looked a little more aware now, a little more awake. He didn't see progress. He didn't see transformation. But he saw intention. And that was enough to breathe. He brushed his teeth, washed his face, and went outside for a walk. The morning air was crisp, colder than usual, and as he breathed it in, he felt both alive and exhausted at the same time. He walked slowly, each step feeling heavier than normal, and he wondered silently if every person who ever tried to change felt this way, hopeful one day, frustrated the next. At the tea shop he sat down again, but today it didn't feel familiar or comforting. It felt like a checkpoint, a measuring place where he had to face the truth about how much effort he was really giving. He stirred his drink and stared at it, thinking about the version of himself he wanted to become. Not a perfect one. Not a rich or famous one. Just one that didn't quit when things started getting difficult. He remembered something he once heard, day 1 is inspiration, day 2 is motivation, day 3 is routine, and day 7 is the truth. Today was his truth. He finished his tea and walked to the small park again. Children were playing, people were jogging, someone was stretching quietly near a tree. Everyone there was in their own journey, in their own struggle, and for a moment, Tet felt strangely connected to them. He found a bench and sat down, leaning back, breathing deeply. He could feel the resistance in his body telling him to go home, to rest, to take a break. But deep inside, he knew what that voice really meant. It wasn't asking him to rest, it was trying to pull him back into old habits, old comfort, old versions of himself. Change is never hardest on day one. It's hardest on the days where nothing exciting happens, no big inspiration, no big breakthrough, just you fighting the same old battles inside your mind. He closed his eyes and whispered softly, "I won't go back." He repeated it again, slower this time, "I won't go back." And something shifted. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. But enough to give him strength. He stood up and started walking again, not fast, not with confidence, but with determination. The sun was rising higher, painting the world in warm gold, and for the first time that morning, Tet felt a gentle sense of direction. He wasn't changing yet. He wasn't improving yet. But he was trying, and sometimes trying is the only thing that keeps you alive long enough to see the real result. He walked home, showered, cleaned his room, opened a notebook and wrote down a single sentence, "I will not quit." He looked at those 4 words for a long time, letting them settle into his bones. He didn't know what day 30 would look like, what day 60 would look like, or what day 90 would demand from him. But he knew what today required, effort. Not perfection. Not motivation. Effort. And for the first time since starting this journey, he accepted that struggling didn't mean failing, it meant he was finally doing the work. As the day ended, he lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling again, but this time there was no panic, no frustration, just a quiet understanding that becoming someone new requires fighting the battles no one sees. And he was ready to fight them again tomorrow. Because today, he didn't give up. And that alone made day 7 the first victory of his 90-day journey. Day 10 was the first time I noticed something real was happening, not on the outside, but inside my mind. I didn't wake up excited or full of energy, I woke up normal, but with a strange sense of purpose that didn't exist before. It was like my brain was finally starting to believe that I wasn't joking this time. I remember standing in front of the mirror, not to judge myself like before, but just to look, and for once, I didn't see someone weak. I saw someone trying, and that felt new. My routines were still small, but they were turning into something powerful, consistency. I didn't walk for 10 minutes anymore, I walked for 20. I didn't write a few lines, I filled a whole page. And one afternoon, something unexpected happened, I said no to something that didn't serve me. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt like breaking a chain I didn't know I'd been carrying for years. The old me would say yes to everything, even when it drained me, because I didn't want to disappoint anyone. But now, for the first time, I chose myself. That moment changed something in my mind. I realized that transformation isn't loud. It's not fireworks or big announcements. It's choosing what matters even when nobody sees it. It's showing up for yourself even when you don't feel like it. It's holding the pen and rewriting your own story one sentence at a time. And as I closed my journal that night, I realized something quietly powerful, I wasn't reacting to life anymore. I was shaping it. Day 18 arrived with a kind of heaviness I couldn't explain. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't stress, it was more like a weight pressing down on my motivation. I didn't want to get out of bed, and the old voice in my head, the one that always whispered that I would fail anyway, started talking again. It said things like, "You've done enough, why are you trying so hard, and, just skip today, it won't matter." But here's the thing, skipping one day always mattered. One day used to turn into 7, and 7 used to turn into a whole month of feeling worthless. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, knowing exactly what would happen if I listened to that voice. So I didn't. I got up slowly, almost forcing myself, and decided that today didn't need to be perfect, it just needed to happen. My walk that morning wasn't strong or fast, it was slow, heavy, almost dragging. But every step felt like a small victory. Halfway through, I realized something important: motivation isn't what moves you forward. Discipline does. And discipline grows when you do things even when you don't feel like it. When I finished my walk, I wasn't proud of the speed or distance, but I was proud that I showed up. Later that day, I opened my journal, not because I had something exciting to write, but because I promised myself I would. And as I wrote, I started feeling lighter. I wrote about my fears, my frustrations, my doubts, and somehow they felt smaller once they were on paper instead of inside me. That afternoon, something interesting happened. A friend messaged me with a casual, "You seem different lately." It wasn't a compliment, it wasn't a big statement, but it was the first outside confirmation that something in me was shifting. It made me realize that change doesn't always show on the surface, but people can sense it: your energy, your aura, the way you respond, the way you carry yourself. Even when you don't see your own progress, others sometimes notice before you do. That night, I sat with my thoughts and realized that I had survived a day that would have normally broken me. I used to give up whenever days like this happened, but today, I didn't. And surviving this day made me feel stronger than the days when everything went smoothly. Growth doesn't happen on easy days, it happens on days like this, when the world feels heavy and you choose to move anyway. As I went to bed, something warm settled inside me, something steady and calm. Maybe it was resilience, or maybe it was the quiet confidence of knowing that I was becoming someone who didn't quit at the first sign of difficulty. And in that moment, lying in the dark, I whispered the truth I had been waiting years to accept: I'm changing, even when it doesn't feel like it. Day 27 came with a sense of quiet strength, the kind you don't notice unless you pause long enough to feel it. I woke up earlier than usual, not because I set an alarm, but because something within me wanted to rise. For years, mornings felt like a battle I always lost, but now they were slowly becoming a place where I could reset, breathe, and remind myself who I was trying to become. I sat by the window with my cup of warm tea, watching the sky shift from gray to a soft orange, and for the first time, I felt like I was watching my own transformation unfold in slow motion. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. That morning, I realized I was no longer living on autopilot. I used to move through my days without awareness, without intention, without presence. But now, I noticed little details: how the air felt cooler than usual, how the birds were louder, how my breathing felt deeper. These tiny things that I used to ignore were becoming signs that I was waking up to my own life. When I started my 90-day plan, I thought the change would come from big actions, from massive effort, from intense routines. But now I could see it clearly: real change came from showing up in the smallest moments. I began my day with my usual routine: the 10-minute stretch, the short journaling session, the walk that had become a non-negotiable part of my mornings. But something about today felt different. My steps felt lighter, more intentional. I wasn't walking to tick off a task, I was walking to connect with myself. I listened to the sound of my footsteps, the rhythm of my breathing, and the quiet hum of the world waking up around me. And somewhere along that walk, a thought hit me so clearly it almost stopped me in my tracks: you don't become a new person overnight, you grow into them little by little, through repeated decisions that slowly change your identity. When I returned home, I opened my notebook and wrote a question at the top of the page: who am I becoming? It surprised me, because for the first time, I didn't write it with confusion, fear, or doubt. I wrote it with curiosity. With possibility. With hope. The old me would have listed flaws, mistakes, and insecurities. But today, the words flowed differently. I wrote about becoming someone who keeps promises to himself, someone who doesn't run from discomfort, someone who believes that a better life is possible through consistent action. Later that day, I joined a small online group focused on self-growth. Normally, I would stay silent and just listen, but something inside me nudged me to speak. When I shared my journey, my struggles, my doubts, my small victories, I heard my own voice sound steadier than I expected. People listened. People related. People thanked me for being honest. That moment felt like a shift, like I was stepping out of the version of me who hid and into the version of me who showed up. The evening brought an unexpected challenge. A situation that would have normally triggered my anxiety popped up, a minor misunderstanding with someone close to me. Before, I would react instantly, emotionally, and regretfully. But tonight, I paused. I breathed. I responded calmly. And the problem resolved without turning into a storm. It was a small moment, but it showed me how much inner work had been happening silently beneath the surface. I was becoming more grounded, more aware, more in control of my reactions. As the night got quiet, I sat in my room with the lights off, just thinking. Day 27 wasn't extraordinary in the traditional sense, no big achievements, no dramatic breakthroughs. But it was transformational in its own gentle way. It showed me that the real change wasn't found in the loud moments, it was found in the soft ones. In choosing patience instead of frustration. In choosing honesty instead of avoidance. In choosing consistency over perfection. I realized that this journey wasn't just changing my habits, it was rewriting the way I saw myself, and maybe that's the biggest change of all, learning to see yourself not as who you were, but as who you're becoming. I ended the day with a quiet promise to myself, one that felt stronger than every promise I made before: keep going. You're closer than you think. Day 38 began with a strange heaviness in my chest, not sadness, not fear, but something in between, like my mind was carrying too many thoughts at once. I lay in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint morning sounds outside my window, wondering why today felt different. It wasn't a bad day, but it wasn't an easy one either. It was the kind of day where you realize how far you've come and how far you still have to go. I finally got up, walked slowly to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. As I stood there, I felt the familiar pull of old habits trying to drag me back, the urge to scroll endlessly, to avoid my morning routine, to convince myself that skipping one day wouldn't matter. But something deep inside whispered back, reminding me of the promise I made to myself: even on the days when motivation fades, discipline must remain. So I showed up. Not perfectly, not enthusiastically, but honestly. I rolled out my mat and stretched my body, each movement feeling heavier than usual. My breathing was uneven at first, but slowly it settled, finding its rhythm like waves returning to the shore. After stretching, I sat on the floor with my journal in hand. I didn't know what to write, so I wrote exactly that: I don't know what to write today. And from that simple sentence, the truth poured out: my doubts, my frustrations, my fear of slipping backward, my worry that maybe I wasn't changing as much as I hoped. But as the ink filled the page, I noticed something I didn't see before. I wasn't writing from a place of weakness, I was writing from a place of awareness. The old me ignored emotions, avoided them, pushed them down until they exploded. But now I was able to sit with them, observe them, and understand them. That, in itself, was change. Later in the morning, I went out for my usual walk. The air was colder than yesterday, brushing against my skin like a quiet reminder that seasons shift whether we're ready or not. I walked slowly, letting my thoughts untangle. At one point, I passed a small group of people laughing loudly, full of energy. For a moment, something inside me tightened. I used to think living loudly meant living fully. I used to feel small around people who seemed so confident, so alive. But today, I didn't feel smaller. I felt different, calmer, more grounded, like I didn't need to match anyone else's volume to feel worthy. On the way back, I stopped at a small bench under a tree. I sat there for a long time, letting the stillness settle over me. And while I sat, a realization surfaced like a gentle wave rising to the shore: change doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable, uncertain, messy. Sometimes it pulls you into a quiet space where old wounds echo louder than usual. But that doesn't mean the change isn't happening. Growth often disguises itself as discomfort. The afternoon was slow. I tried to work on my tasks, but my mind kept drifting. Instead of fighting it, I allowed myself to take breaks, to breathe, to reset. I used to see breaks as weakness, but now I'm learning that rest is part of discipline too. In the evening, something unexpected happened. I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in months. In the past, messages like this would throw me off, pull me back into old memories, old patterns, old versions of myself. But tonight, I read it calmly. I replied with clarity, not emotion. I didn't fall into old traps. I didn't let the past define me. And when I put my phone down, I realized that this moment of quiet strength, was proof that I was becoming someone new. As the night grew deeper, I sat at my desk with the soft glow of my lamp. The heaviness I woke up with wasn't gone, but it had changed shape. It was no longer a weight, it was a message. A reminder that the journey wasn't meant to feel easy every day. It was meant to feel real. I thought about who I was on day one, uncertain, scattered, doubting myself at every turn. And now, here on day 38, even on a heavy day, I was choosing growth. I was choosing to keep moving. I was choosing myself. That's when something inside me softened. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet truth I needed to hear: you don't need to be perfect to be changing. Before going to bed, I wrote one last line in my journal, a line I want to remember not only today but every day forward. Some days test you, not to break you, but to show you how much stronger you've become. Day 52 began before the sun had fully risen, with a faint golden light stretching quietly across my room, as if the morning itself was hesitating to wake up. I lay there for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of life beginning, birds calling out softly, a motorcycle passing far down the road, the gentle hum of a new day forming. But something felt different today. It wasn't heaviness like day 38. It wasn't excitement either. It was more like a deep, calm awareness, as though I could sense a shift inside me before I even moved. I sat up slowly, feeling the cool air brush against my skin. I didn't rush to check my phone, didn't rush to stand, didn't rush to start anything. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing deeply, realizing that this stillness, this quiet, unforced presence, was something the old me never had. Before, I needed noise to drown out my thoughts. Now, I could sit in silence without fear. After washing up, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not judging, not criticizing, just observing. My eyes looked a little clearer. My posture a little straighter. There was something subtle but undeniable in my expression, like the early signs of someone slowly becoming the person they always wanted to be. And then the thought came, this is what growth looks like, not dramatic, not loud, but quietly persistent. I made tea and held the warm cup in my hands while staring out the window. The world outside felt bigger today, almost inviting. Instead of thinking about what I needed to fix, I found myself thinking about what I had already learned. It hit me gently but deeply. Maybe the journey wasn't about becoming someone new. Maybe it was about uncovering the person I had buried under years of doubt, fear, and noise. With that thought lingering in my mind, I stepped outside for my morning walk. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of early sunlight and distant cooking fires. As I walked, each step felt more grounded than usual. My feet weren't rushing ahead of my mind. Instead, everything moved together at the same pace. A small group of kids ran past me, laughing loudly. I smiled without thinking. Not the forced smile I used to hide behind, but a real one. I kept walking until I reached the small park near my street. The benches were empty, the trees swaying lightly, and the quietness felt like a gentle companion rather than emptiness. I sat there and let my mind drift. And slowly, memories resurfaced, not painful ones, but important ones. I remembered the days when I felt lost and uncertain, the days when I doubted whether I could change at all, the days when even simple routines felt overwhelming. Yet here I was, not perfect, not finished, but undeniably moving forward. For the first time, I truly believed that the effort I had been putting in was shaping me in ways I couldn't always see. Later in the afternoon, something unexpected happened. I received a call from a friend I hadn't spoken to in a long time, someone who had known the older version of me too well. Normally, hearing their voice would bring back old anxieties, old insecurities, old patterns. But today, the conversation felt different. I spoke calmly, confidently, with a steady tone. I didn't shrink. I didn't over-explain. I didn't pretend to be fine. When the call ended, I realized my hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I said something wrong. Instead, I felt proud. Not because I said the right things, but because I stayed true to who I was becoming. In the evening, I went through my journal entries from the past weeks. I read my doubts, my fears, my small wins, my unexpected breakthroughs. It felt like watching a time-lapse of emotional growth, every line showing a version of me learning, adjusting, stumbling, rising. Then I reached the entry from day one. As I read it, a quiet smile spread across my face. The person I was back then felt distant, like someone I cared about deeply but no longer was. It wasn't sadness I felt, it was gratitude. Gratitude for my own courage to start, gratitude for the days that challenged me, gratitude for the small changes that eventually became real transformation. As night approached, I stepped outside to feel the breeze. The sky was darker now, sprinkled with stars. I took a long, slow breath. It wasn't pride that filled me, it was something softer, something steadier. A quiet confidence. A realization that I no longer needed to rush. Change wasn't a race, and growth wasn't measured in dramatic moments. It was measured in mornings like today, in conversations like the one I had, in the silent little victories no one else noticed. Before going back inside, I whispered something I didn't plan, something that rose naturally from the deepest part of me: "You're doing better than you think." And for the first time, I didn't just say it, I believed it. Day 63 began with a clarity I didn't expect. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind of morning that felt like a turning point or a fresh beginning. Instead, it started with an unmistakable sense of awareness, the kind that quietly tells you, "Pay attention today." I woke up earlier than usual, not because of an alarm or a restless night, but because my mind seemed ready before my body. The sky outside my window was a soft gray, the type of morning where the world feels slower and calmer. I sat up and let my feet rest on the floor, noticing the temperature, the texture, the simple reality of being alive in this moment. There was no rush. No pressure. Just space. A surprising amount of space. I stood, stretched, and realized something: I wasn't carrying the usual weight of expectation. Not the kind I put on myself, not the kind I imagined others put on me. Today felt strangely balanced, as if all the thoughts usually scattered in every direction were standing in one line, waiting their turn. I made coffee, not hurriedly, not carelessly, but with intention. The sound of water boiling, the smell of the beans, the warmth spreading from my hands into my chest. For some reason, it all felt clearer. And as I sipped the first cup, a thought came: maybe clarity doesn't always appear as answers. Sometimes it shows up as the quiet ability to see where you're standing. After finishing my coffee, I sat at my desk and opened the notebook where I tracked my days. I didn't write anything immediately. I just looked at how much space I had filled. Pages and pages of emotions, struggles, small breakthroughs, simple routines. My handwriting changed over the weeks, less tense, less shaky, more grounded. It was subtle, but I could see it. Change was happening everywhere, even in the way I held a pen. Today I didn't want to analyze the past or predict the future. I wanted to understand the present. So I tried something different. I wrote exactly what I noticed, nothing more. My breathing feels steady today. My thoughts are not racing. I am not overwhelmed. I feel aware, awake, and calm. These simple lines felt more powerful than the long emotional entries I used to write. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were honest. Honest in a way I hadn't been with myself before. Later in the afternoon, I took a walk, not for exercise, not for distraction, but just to observe. I walked slowly down my street, noticing details I had ignored for years, the cracks on the sidewalk forming patterns like maps, the way the sunlight hit the old metal gate on the corner, the rhythmic tapping of a neighbor repairing something inside their house. Ordinary things, but today they felt meaningful. As if my mind was finally tuned to a frequency I never listened to before. Then something interesting happened. I passed by a small shop where an older man sat outside reading a newspaper. Normally, I would walk past without hesitation, lost in my own world. But today, I looked up and nodded at him. A small, simple gesture. He nodded back with a warm smile. That was it. A 2-second exchange. Yet it lingered in my mind longer than it should have. Because it reminded me of something I often forget: connection doesn't need to be complicated. A moment can be small but still shift something inside you. When I returned home, the clarity stayed with me. Not intense. Not overwhelming. Just steady. I sat again at my desk and began thinking about the past 2 months of this 90-day journey. Not judging them, not labeling them, just observing. And the realization surfaced in a calm, non-dramatic way. I used to think growth was supposed to feel powerful every day, like constant motivation or big revelations. But most of the time, growth feels like this. Quiet. Subtle. Clearer thinking. Better awareness. Fewer storms in the mind. More acceptance of reality. And the most surprising part. On day 63, I didn't feel like I was trying to change. I felt like I was simply living in a way that naturally changed me. Evening came slowly. The sky transitioned from gray to gold to a soft blue. I stood by the window again, watching and thinking. Not in a heavy, deep way. Just noticing. And the thought arrived gently, like a conclusion forming on its own: I am not the same person who started this journey. Even if the changes are quiet, they are real. I didn't need proof. I could feel it in the way I walked, the way I breathed, the way today unfolded without chaos. Before going to bed, I wrote one final line in my journal: some days don't change your life. They just show you how far you've already come. And that was enough for day 63. Day 78 arrived with a quiet sense of warmth, the kind that doesn't come from the sunlight outside but from something steady building inside. It wasn't confidence, not exactly. It was more like a soft acceptance, a recognition that I had survived every day so far, even the ones I thought would break me. I woke up slowly, letting my thoughts drift in naturally instead of rushing to take control of them. And as I sat on the edge of my bed, I felt this unfamiliar but comforting understanding: I'm starting to trust myself again. Not because everything is perfect, not because I've solved all my problems, but because I've finally seen proof that I can keep going, even when I'm tired, even when I'm unsure. This kind of trust doesn't appear overnight, it grows quietly, almost invisibly, until the day you finally notice it. I made breakfast while humming a tune I didn't even know I remembered. The morning felt light, lighter than it had in months. And instead of questioning it or waiting for it to disappear, I allowed it. I let myself enjoy it, because good moments used to feel like accidents to me, but now they feel like small rewards I've earned through consistency. After eating, I spent a long moment looking around my room. Same walls, same desk, same window, but everything felt slightly different because I was seeing it from a calmer state of mind. And that made me realize something important: your environment doesn't always need to change for your life to feel different. Sometimes it's you who changes, and suddenly everything around you transforms too, without moving an inch. Later that day, I went out for a walk, not to solve anything, not to fix my thoughts, but simply to move. Movement has become therapy for me, gentle, natural, without pressure. As I walked through the neighborhood, I felt the air on my skin and paid attention to the sound of my footsteps. I wasn't rushing anywhere. I wasn't escaping anything. I was just walking, present, grounded, connected to the moment in a way I rarely allowed myself before. I passed by a group of kids playing football in the street. For a moment, I stopped and watched them. Their laughter, their competitiveness, the way they argued about whose turn it was, it all felt so alive. And I realized something as I stood there, somewhere along the way, as we grow older, we forget how to play, how to be light, how to exist without overthinking. We forget how to simply enjoy being alive. And maybe this journey, these 78 days, were helping me find pieces of that childlike freedom again, slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. When I returned home, I didn't dive into tasks like I usually did. Instead, I sat for a long moment and reflected. Not in a heavy way, not in a dramatic way. More like looking in a mirror that suddenly showed me the truth I needed to hear. I've been too hard on myself for too long. I've punished myself for not being perfect. I've blamed myself for every delay, every mistake, every pause. But today felt different. Today, I understood that consistency isn't the same as perfection. Showing up, even imperfectly, is still progress. And somewhere inside, I felt a soft, steady voice say, "You're doing better than you think." The afternoon passed gently. I listened to music, cleaned my space, took my time. Nothing extraordinary happened, yet everything felt meaningful because I wasn't fighting myself. Instead, I was cooperating with myself for the first time. I even caught myself smiling at random moments, not because something amazing happened, but because I felt a sense of alignment. A sense that my actions and my thoughts were finally walking in the same direction instead of pulling against each other. As evening approached, I opened my notebook again. But this time, I didn't write about my struggles or goals or fears. That I wrote about gratitude, not in a forced way, but in a way that felt natural. I listed things I often ignored, the way I've become patient with myself, the quiet mornings where my mind feels balanced, the small wins I never celebrated, the calmness I now experience even on difficult days. And while writing, I had a realization that settled into me like warm light: growth doesn't always show itself through big leaps. Sometimes it shows through how gently you treat yourself. Sometimes it shows through the way you breathe during chaos. Sometimes it shows through the way you no longer fall apart in situations that used to overwhelm you. By nighttime, I felt something shift. Not dramatically, not in a fireworks kind of way. It was a small, steady shift, like a door inside me opening just a little wider. And I understood what that opening meant: I'm becoming ready. Ready for the next days. Ready for the next changes. Ready for the next version of myself. Day 78 didn't change everything, but it made one thing very clear: healing is not loud. Progress is not loud. Transformation is not loud. It's the quiet days like this that shape you the most, the days where your heart whispers truths you finally feel strong enough to hear. And as I lay down to sleep, the last thought that crossed my mind wasn't fear or doubt or pressure. It was something simple, something soft, something I hadn't felt in years: I'm proud of myself. Day 100 arrived not with fanfare, not with celebration, but with the quiet sound of dawn slipping through the curtains. A golden light filled the room, warm and gentle, almost as if the world itself had decided to whisper, "You've come far." I stayed still for a long while, letting the sunlight rest on my face, feeling something inside me settle, like all the scattered pieces of the past months were finally finding their rightful places. It didn't feel like an ending, it felt like the beginning of something important. For the first time in this journey, I didn't wake with fear, doubt, or urgency. I woke with calm certainty, a deep inner knowing: I am not the same person who started this journey. And maybe that's what true growth is: not loud, not dramatic, but a slow, persistent rewrite of the heart. I got up and stood in front of the mirror. For a long moment, I simply looked at my own reflection. Same eyes, same face, same body, but a different energy. A different weight. A different story behind the eyes. I wasn't looking at someone who was struggling to start anymore. I was looking at someone who had survived the hardest parts and kept going anyway. Someone who had cried quietly in the dark but still managed to rise with the sun. Someone who had been tested by silence, setbacks, loneliness, and doubt, but learned to stand without shaking. And in that reflection, I saw something I hadn't allowed myself to see in a long time: strength. Not the kind that roars, but the kind that breathes slowly, steadily. The kind that remains after every storm passes. I went outside early, letting the morning air wrap around me. The world felt softer, somehow brighter. Even the ordinary details, the sound of birds, the smell of the earth, the distant noise of people beginning their day, felt like gifts. And as I walked, I realized something profound: the world didn't change. I did. And because I changed, everything around me finally made sense. There was a path ahead of me, the same path I had walked countless times in uncertainty, but today it felt different. It felt like a road leading somewhere meaningful. As I moved through it, thoughts drifted in, not doubts, but memories. Me on day 1, lost and afraid. Me on day 20, frustrated and tired. Me on day 40, trying again after failing twice. Me on day 60, beginning to understand discipline. Me on day 78, discovering calm. And now, day 100, where all those versions of me stood together, not as reminders of struggle but as proof of endurance. Every version of me had contributed to the person I was becoming. Not one day was wasted. Not one setback was meaningless. Not one moment of pain failed to teach me something essential. I paused near an old tree, one I had walked past many times but never truly noticed. Today, I looked at it closely. The trunk was thick, strong, marked by years of storms. Its branches stretched wide, full of life. It didn't grow in a straight line, it twisted, bent, curved, but still reached upward. I realized I was like that tree. Not perfect. Not straight. Not untouched by storms. But alive. Growing. Reaching. Stronger because of the twists, not in spite of them. I sat down at the base of the tree and closed my eyes. I let my breath slow. In that stillness, a truth surfaced: I had spent so long thinking I needed to become someone extraordinary to be worthy of love, success, peace, confidence. But the journey taught me something different. Worthiness isn't earned through achievements. It's something you carry within you from the very beginning. The only thing you ever needed was to uncover it beneath the layers of doubt and fear. And now, on day 100, it felt uncovered. Visible. Honored. The afternoon found me sitting at my desk, opening the same notebook that had captured my struggles for months. But today, I didn't write goals, fears, or to-do lists. Today, I wrote a promise. A promise to myself that whatever comes next, whatever challenge, dream, or change, I will not abandon myself again. I will not speak to myself with cruelty. I will not shrink when things get hard. I will not forget the lessons these 100 days gave me. I wrote it slowly, carefully, like carving a vow into stone: I choose myself. Every day. Even on the days I don't feel strong. Especially then. And as the ink dried on the paper, I felt something powerful. A shift. A renewal. A doorway opening. By evening, clouds painted the sky in gold, pink, and lavender, the kind of sunset that feels almost unreal. I stood outside, watching the sky change, and I understood the symbolism without needing words. Endings can be beautiful because they lead into new beginnings. The sun wasn't dying, it was preparing to rise again. Just like me. Just like all the days ahead. Day 100 didn't feel like a finish line. It felt like a turning point. A moment where the past and future shook hands silently. Where the old version of me stepped aside with gratitude and the new version took its place, steady and ready. And as the first stars appeared, I whispered something into the quiet evening air, something that felt like the final sentence of the first book of my life and the first sentence of the next: I'm ready now. Then I walked back inside, not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with a calm, grounded confidence that had taken 100 days to build. And with every step, I knew this truth deep in my bones: this isn't the end of the story. This is where the real story begins.